I should have peed. Well, we can break for peeing later.
Yeah. Yeah, if you got to pee, we can break. No big deal. I should have peed too.
Should we just go now?
Mm-hmm.
That way it's at the
Let's
top
do
of
it.
the video.
All right. Yeah. That's a good point. That's a good idea.
We are in movie mode where we do not tolerate Honda Civic slander. My name is Ryan Snelling.
I'm Austin Burke. How's everybody doing today? Don't be talking smack about my 04 Honda Civic. That puppy, I'm going to get that to 400,000 miles. That's the goal, Ryan. Am I crazy for that?
No, I'm going to get mine to 300. First, I have to get out the ridiculous smell my car has. I've got baking soda lining all of the mats, and of course, because it goes all over the place, it's all over the seats as well. If I get pulled over, somebody's going to think it's something else, but that's all right. Honda Civics.
That's okay.
Honda Civics all around here at the Movie Mode podcast. Guys,
they're the best.
Thank you so much. We've been getting great feedback, man. Like, I think people enjoyed the Hollywood Chris episode. I don't think anybody agrees with our list, but that's what sort of makes it special, is that everybody's got their own favorite Chris, and that's how it should be. You know, it shouldn't be an easy task coming up with what. But I thought it was a fun episode, so we've got a review show out. We've got whatever we call that. How you feeling about Movie Mode after week 2?
Feeling great. I expected some different opinions with the Chris's, the Chris countdown. That was exciting, man. Loving the feedback. Got some comments over on Patreon as well. Some things about some episodes. So love what everybody's doing, man, all over the place. For the people who are joining Patreon and watching YouTube, or just listen to us on the simple old audio podcast. We can't say thank you enough. And man, I'm excited to just keep this going and see if we can hit 7,000 episodes, Ryan? You feeling me?
I'm down.
Cool with that?
Yeah.
All right.
I'm down. My favorite comment, and forgive me, I don't remember who it was, what the username was, but they said something along the lines of, it sounds like this podcast has already like found its groove. Like we already sound like we know what we're doing. So that was by far my favorite comment. I appreciate that. So anyway, we're here to talk about Hitman. There will be a non-spoiler discussion before we break and do a spoiler discussion. So it's okay if you haven't seen the movie. You can still listen to us chat anyway and then come back and finish the podcast, but we will break for that. And we've got a few other things to talk about. Well, we're actually recording like at a decent hour too.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not late this time around. We sort of got it together. Is that daylight behind you, or is that just another light that you don't normally have on?
No, it's daylight. It's feels strange because normally during this time I'm watching the baby or hanging out with the baby or feeding the baby. But my wife tonight, she said, "Hey, honey, you go downstairs and you sit by yourself in that basement. You do whatever you want." And I said, "Honey, we're going to record the podcast." And it feels good, Ryan. It feels really good. I also forgot to close the curtain, so that's why you can actually see that. It's not supposed to be open, but you know.
It looks great. It's fine.
Thanks, man.
I've got my blackout curtains. I don't like the lighting and the camera and everything. Once there's daylight behind me, I get just more red. So this is like the most natural I can look is in this scenario. So I have to shut my blinds, throw the blackout curtains, even though it's broad daylight outside. But anyway,
it's the best. It's the best.
Yeah. So not to talk too much about the episode. I guess we can talk about this how we want. But, Star Wars put out a television show this past week. The first 2 episodes of The Acolyte are available now, and I am already exhausted. Yes, very good. I'm already exhausted by Star Wars, and I've like been out of the loop. I've been out of it. I've stayed out of it. But I watched the show, did a video on my own channel about the show, go to work, and people are talking Star Wars, and I'm already just like, where's the eject button? Like, I'm already like, I'm so over this. But you obviously are more involved. You made your videos as well. How you feeling post-Acolyte?
Well, I love how this, I'm going to put Grogu down for a second for the audio listeners. I love how this franchise is bringing everyone together. It's a very, for a lot of people, it's a religious experience. And as we know, religion is just so non-divisive. It is a beautiful thing to see the community just come together as one. No, it's been terrible. I am getting so angry looking at my comments section because according to about 50 to 75 people, I'm a paid Disney shill, Ryan. And so, I used to just kind of shoo that off, whatever, who cares? And now I want to sit there and I want to fight everybody. I've refrained for the most part, but man, it's chaos the way it's being received. And here's the thing. I didn't even love I saw the first 4 episodes. I didn't love them. I think there's some really cool things in there. I think there's potential for the show to keep finding its footing as it's going because it's getting better as it's going. But I wasn't sitting here raving. Even then, you look at some of these audience Rotten Tomato scores and you look at the IMDb score, which is mostly 1 stars. That's how you know a lot of this is fabricated. That's how you know a lot of this is just kind of spamming all of these sites because there's nothing within giving something a 1-star rating that has anything remotely close to nuance. And because there's so much of that, it's like 80% that. And then there are the normal people who are saying, I didn't love it. 3 stars, here's the reason. 4 stars, here's the reason. It's just a lot of spamming at this point. And most of it happened before the episodes premiered. Yeah, and that's how you know it. That's where most of my comments came from.
Yeah. And then there's the hypocrisy of people who obviously have an agenda are criticizing you for your made up agenda. So there's that for you. If we could talk about the Acolyte for a second, the Ryan Snelling way, because I don't want to talk about Star Wars the way that people online want to talk about Star Wars. So let me talk about the Acolyte the Ryan Snelling way. First of all, Amanda Stenberg, who plays, I'll say the main character without spoiling.
Yeah.
Is so hot. My God.
It's not where I thought you were.
She is bad. Bad, she's dope. Not bad, like a bad. Yeah. Oh my God. She is beautiful. And I'm telling you right now, I'm watching every episode for her.
Yeah, boy.
Every episode. Yeah. She's dope. So let me just say that.
She's awesome.
She's great in Bodies too. But I'm not gonna lie though, I've refrained from saying this on my watch along, but she looks exactly like the last chick I had a thing with too, which I'm really struggling though because that ended so badly. Okay. So I'm just I hate that she looks just like her, but also she's smoking hot.
Hey, well, if you ever want to get back into that relationship, that needs to be your starter line. Hey, you know who you look like? Do you want to go watch The Acolyte? Because you look just like Amanda Stenberg. I think that's a great way to start it, right?
I want nothing to do with that chick because she's a raging bitch. And she was hooking up with a guy at work that we worked with the entire time, and I didn't know until after the fact. Anyway, so that's why
I agree with you. She is a raging bitch. Yes.
Yeah, but Amanda Stenberg is so hot that I will watch every episode, and I'll find a way through it somehow. No, anyway, but outside of that, take Star Wars out of it. You got a TV show that came out on Disney Plus. It wasn't bad for a TV show. It was fine.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
But also, it could be terrible by the end, and then we'll talk shit about it at the end. But right now, I've only seen the first episode. I haven't watched episode 2 yet. First episode, I like.
Okay.
There's a few things that I didn't care for. But, it just wasn't that big of a deal either way. So,
and I guess I will indulge for just a second the Star Wars negativity. I don't feel what I once felt for Star Wars, and Absolutely that is not. Really sad. And so, and I don't even want to sit here and say, oh, it's the fan base in my comment section. It's as crazy as some of these people are, I do agree with some of the negative points. There are, things about the look of the show that feel a little cheap. There are some things about the characters and character decisions and just the integration of some things. I'm we're kind of getting away from what Star Wars once was and the fun of it all. And so as bad as some of that negativity is, I do somewhat agree with some of the negatives there. And because of that, I'm not super I am much more of a Dune guy right now than I am a Star Wars guy. And 5 years ago, I never would have thought that. Yeah. And it's crazy. And so I need that project. Maybe it's Andor season 2 to get me back in, man. Sweep me off my feet, because I'm not feeling it right now.
I don't think Lucasfilm really has an excuse anymore. I mean, the product is so diluted, and I will say that the Acolyte should have been a ton of world building. Like that first episode, it should have been about the High Republic. This is the prequel to Star Wars, and when you have House of the Dragon, you have these things like people want to be like, it's not a comparison game, but it is. It is. When
all of it is.
When you are fighting for people's attention and you can look at what their standards are, all you have to do is look up what the audience retention was for Game of Thrones. It's like, it's all available. It's all there. You know what people are looking for. And when it comes to science fiction and fantasy, we need to feel the scope. We expect complex, examinations of not just the characters, but the world building and what the social classes are and the economics of things. And like Andor did that. Like they know how to do it. They're just choosing not to. And so when you really just have like thin characters and it's like, but is that even really what a Jedi would do? And you're like, you're just messing with shit that, like, why are you spending your time on this? The High Republic was introduced, 5 years ago in a book? This is when the world was actually, should have actually been introduced to this. Was the first time it was shown on screen. And it's like, I don't even know. It just looks like it's in the prequel era.
Yeah.
Like we went to Coruscant. We saw that. Maybe it's less busy, but the Jedis have different types of robes than Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan had, and that's it? Like, what? And then you do things like old boy read the mind of the green frog alien from Phantom Menace, and I'm just like, would a Jedi do that? But also, if you want us to ask those questions, like, please do that. Like, please have like some kind of controversial thing that the Jedi are doing, but like also address it in the show. Like, why was the chick that was with them, I don't even know her name, but the Jedi like, hey, are you sure you should have done that? Because reading a mind, it should be against, like, examine it within the show. Because if you don't, then the fans are just going to lose their fucking shit over it.
And that's when we get the spinoffs and the novels about the show and all of those. Well, to take that a step further, I just think, Andor aside, all of these shows, they're the same. I know the story's different. I know we're exploring different characters, but I watch Mandalorian season 3, and then I watch Boba Fett, and then I watch Ahsoka, and I watch this, and they all look the same. They all feel the same. And it's like, at a point, I just feel like I can't tell the difference between the way that I'm feeling while watching this. It just feels, like you said, there's so much of it now. They all look the same. It's all the same style. It's all the same look and feel. That's when it starts to feel studio manufactured. And I've always rolled my eyes at that, like, people say the studio churns out this. Yeah, with Star Wars, it kind of feels that way right now. It really does. And that's why Andor is so special, because there's clearly a visionary behind it. There's clearly someone who is going for a distinct style. And that's why our favorite MCU movies are our favorite MCU movies, other than the big together ones, the Avengers movies, is because you always have a director that brings something distinct to the table. Everything else is just the same old thing. But with Star Wars right now, almost everything is the same old thing. And so I just want to feel differently when watching a Star Wars show or movie again. And I don't know when that's going to be, other than Andor Season 2. Hopefully this new movie, maybe what they say, James Mangold's working on a Star Wars film. Maybe that will be the one. But right now, it just feels like the same old thing, even though I did enjoy parts of the show.
Again, I've only seen the first episode, but I'm confident. I know for a fact right now, it's going to be the worst of the 4 shows that debut in June. The Bear, House of the Dragon, and The Boys will all definitively have better seasons than The Acolyte. I can guarantee it without seeing a single frame from any of them. So I can't get any more excited. I can only watch this show to see a hot chick do some stuff with a lightsaber. Like that's it. That's what it is to me. So
do some comparisons. Look at just use your eyes and look at the Acolyte. Then look at House of the Dragon, then look at the Bear, then look at the Boys. And it's like one of these does not feel cinematic in the slightest. It feels CGI and special effects heavy. The other three, the way that they are shot, the way that they look, the way that they make you feel, they all have something about them that allows them to stand out. And that's why they're special. And I have seen the first 2 episodes of the new season of The Boys. Can't say anything yet, but yup.
Yeah.
You're right.
So the last thing I want to talk about is this this issue. I think Charlie Bartlett is the name of the actor, but he plays the main Jedi, I guess. Well, Master Soul, the Squid Game actor. I don't know if he's like the. Well, anyway, he's from Russian Doll.
He's great, by the way.
So he was being interviewed by Perry Nemiroff, of all people, and
love Perry.
He was kind of he was talking about how he was just a fan of Star Wars, but he loved how it operated in all these gray areas because depending on your point of view, this person is actually bad, but this person is good, blah, blah, blah. He was just making a general point about Star Wars. And then he says, I'm going to get in trouble for doing this. And he does it in like a folksy way, not like in a way that's aware of like how people will actually react to what he's about to say. But he says, I'm going to get in trouble for saying this, but nobody wants to talk about how Anakin blew up the Death Star and killed thousands and thousands of people. So he's using that argument that people use on the internet about how are the rebels the heroes if they murdered all the people working in the Death Star? Except there's one fatal error. He said Anakin did it.
Oh, boy.
And so Star Wars fans do what they do and have been lighting this poor guy up. So here's my take on this. I've always thought that when an actor says, like at a press junket or whatever, that they're a fan of something, you have to take that with a grain of salt. Because not only have they been coached to speak that way, but there's not going to be anybody maybe dumb enough to say Anakin blew up the Death Star, but nobody's dumb enough to be like, I wasn't a fan of Star Wars until I read The Acolyte. Like, no.
Mm-hmm.
So when celebrities just say that, so sometimes I'll hear somebody be like, I'm such a big fan of David Fincher, blah, 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 blah. But then you keep hearing them talk, and then you're like, I don't believe you've ever actually seen a David Fincher film. Like, I think you met him once and thought he was a good guy. Like, there's times when that comes across, but it's like, it doesn't really matter if we're just talking about how an actor, maybe the actor still does a great job in a show, and that's all we care about. But I've always felt that. Whenever an actor says that they're a fan of something, whatever, I've never taken that seriously. Unless they write out proof. I think the exception is like Iman Vellani. Like you can tell Iman, and that's what makes her so special. It's like she'll talk about how like she has arguments with Kevin Feige about which if we're in Earth 616 because of this, and this, and it's like those are the exceptions. Otherwise, I actually don't believe actors when they say because there's fans to it. Or I'm sorry, there's fans to it. There's levels of fandom.
Yes. So
when an actor says that, I never believe it's on the level of what the internet fandom is. So when we're talking about people on the internet talking about Star Wars, they are the most fans of that thing. And that actor will never compete with the people who talk about that subject online. I've just always felt that way. So let's start there. He says that I don't expect him to know everything about Star Wars. At the same time, I actually think he misspoke.
Yeah.
Like I watched the video multiple times. He says it twice which really hurts his case. And I think that's why everybody was like, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about, because he doubles down on it. But like a few seconds later, he says something again, like, and we all know Anakin was here. But so he like says it again. I genuinely think he misspoke. But nobody wants to talk about that, because all they want to do is use it to justify their arguments that are anti-Disney. So anyway, that's sort of my take on it. I kind of feel bad for the guy. It's a separate thing. If he doesn't do a good job in the show, if his character sucks, whatever, those are all still up for debate. But I genuinely think it's gross how people are like using it as ammunition, because that kind of stuff can happen to anybody. And it's the worst to do it on such a big stage like that. And it also was like, Perry didn't correct him, which is like, it's not her place to do it. It is weird though that she like let it happen.
Yeah.
She didn't just go, you mean Luke? And then it would have resolved. And I'm just like, that was weird too, though. I don't know why she let that happen. And then on the other side of that, Daphne Keene is sitting beside him, and she's like jokingly being like, you should shut up now. You should shut up now. And so people are using that to act like Daphne Keene is aware of his mistake. But I don't believe that either. I think Daphne Keene was telling him to stop because of the controversy of the point he was making. Like, Star Wars fans don't want to hear that Luke killed millions of people, not the actual Anakin flub. The way that whenever you see the Spider-Man cast on Jimmy Kimmel and Tom Holland goes to speak, and then somebody says, you should shut up now, at the risk of pissing off the fans for his ultimate point. That's what she did. But Star Wars fans are saying that she was aware of his, and it's like, maybe, but that's not what she means when she's telling him to shut up. So anyway, I'm just here to say, I think people are misconstruing this, and it's annoying as shit. That's all.
Well, there's two controversies there. The one is essentially like the argument of, well, does Batman kill? Yeah, he kills multiple people in every movie. Does he mean to kill? That's up for debate with every film. I've seen that 1,000 times. And that's kind of what the Luke destroying the Death Star and killing all those people is. It's that same debate, which will be fought over until the end of the time. And I'm just sitting here like, okay, he does. It was cool. It's one of my favorite movies ever. Who cares? Let's move on. That's just at this point in my life, dude. Like I was at the bank the other day talking about my savings, my retirement. I'm like, I'm not that I'm too old for some of this stuff. I'm just like, who cares? Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Just who cares about some of the stupid stuff? Anyway, that's fine. It's a weird thing to say. Why would you say that? Kind of, you should be aware it's going to piss off fans. Okay. I haven't seen the clip, so you telling me this was the first time I've heard about this. But just you saying that, I think back to all of the times, and because I'm making YouTube videos, I get the opportunity to correct my mistakes, which I do very often. Mm-hmm. But I think of all of the times where I have had a specific name of an actor in my head, and then I will say that name 3 or 4 times in the video I'm recording, and then I'll realize, that's not the right actor. It's a different actor. I just said the wrong name. And I've done that so many times, and everyone does that. And so I can look at the argument of he was thinking Luke and he said Anakin, and then he was thinking Luke and said Anakin again. I think it's a fair statement. Now, obviously, the pissed off fans, they're not going to look at it as a fair statement, as a fair, that's fine. We understand that at this point. But I believe someone trying to spark that kind of controversy. We say that they're coached to say he loves Star Wars, and whether he does or doesn't, that's what they're told to say, right? Well, there should also be some things in there saying, hey, maybe you don't want to say these certain things because it's going to piss off fans. Maybe you should kind of stay away from these types of topics because, of course, even if he wouldn't have made the Anakin flub, that would have just started given people fueled the fire of people attacking this show, attacking Acolyte, because I've seen them attack it for all sorts of reasons, for all kinds of things that actors have said. And there have been some things where I'm like, yeah, they probably shouldn't have said that or done this, talking about the actor in real life. But this example, I'm like, it's just a guy sharing an opinion on something he may not even know all that much about. But if I'm looking at it, he probably knows it's Luke. He just said Anakin. Okay, that's fine. And it should have been less of a story than it was, but ultimately you're talking about Star Wars, so it's going to be a story.
Answer this truthfully. I don't know what you're going to say, but have you ever once thought or been convinced that, pick any Marvel actor, have you ever actually been convinced that they watch every other MCU project that they're not even in?
No.
Exactly.
Maybe Iman Vellani, like
yeah, but because it's obvious.
She's so invested.
But like, I think even Hemsworth recently with his big feature in, was it Variety or something right before Furiosa, he talked about how like he's not able to keep up with everything in the MCU. Like he hasn't watched Loki yet because he's a dad and stuff like. It's like, I don't think any MCU actor actually watches the MCU.
Oh, you don't think Gwyneth Paltrow has watched all the Marvel movies?
Yeah, that's somebody. Well, that's the other thing too, is that like most actors won't come out and say it, but I don't expect them to watch everything and know everything that's going on, because actors, people forget, actors, it's like being an actor is different than being, I don't know how to put this.
A fan? I mean, because
you don't
have to be a fan to be an actor.
An actor is a professional person who is hired to pretend to be somebody, to play a role.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, an actor isn't necessarily like a diehard movie fan.
No, not often.
It's like, no, they get hired to like perform a role, and then when they're great at the role, and then maybe they become this like shepherd of a universe like RDJ did. But it's like, I don't think RDJ watched every single MCU project. Like, there's no way he watched WandaVision. There's no way.
No. Well, especially now that he's not in the universe anymore. But even prior to that, I'd say there were plenty of movies that he wasn't a part of that he didn't. I mean, he's a busy man, and these are all busy people. And I don't expect them to be entrenched in the universe that they're a part of. I just expect them to be entrenched in the character, because that's their job, and that's what they're being paid to do. And a lot of them are being they're being paid to be great at it, and they are great at it. But again, I look at somebody like a Tom Cruise, and I hear him talk about film and filmmaking, and he has that. Did you see that 4-hour course that he shows some actors that he has?
Glenn Powell.
That's a guy. Yeah. Glenn Powell was talking about that. That's a guy who is obsessed with film and filmmaking, and I'm not going to say he's a rare example, but there aren't a lot of people that are that entrenched in the world as a whole of filmmaking. A lot of people are just kind of doing what they do, and a lot of them are really good at it, and that's okay.
I remember when all of that suspicious activity around The Flash was coming out, where people were just coming out of the woodwork to say that the movie was great before it came out. And so like Tom Cruise did a favor for David Zaslav, and people were like memeing all of that. And I'm like,
that's crazy.
No,
man.
I genuinely think Tom Cruise saw The Flash. Like everybody was like, Tom Cruise saw no, he saw it 100%.
For sure.
And he would have seen it whether it was a favor to Zaslav or not. Like, but that's the thing, is like when those people stand out like that, that's when I think even more so that the ones who don't stand out definitely aren't keeping up with this shit. Like,
yeah, I agree.
Yeah. So I've just never expected actors to actually be fans, but you don't need them to. It's fun when they are. It's like, but think about how like you'll see the Avengers cast do like trivia on a Kimmel show, and they're getting shit wrong all the time about their own movies. And it's like, it's fine. So,
well, that's not saying there aren't rare cases. Like I'm sure Hugh Jackman, while he probably wasn't the biggest fan before Wolverine, I'm sure now he's like the world's biggest Wolverine fan. Otherwise, he's been in the role for 20 years, right? But the people who aren't, even Robert Downey hasn't watched all the movies, I'm sure. But the people who aren't in those roles for that long, they don't devote their entire life to it, and they're just in 2 or 3 movies. I don't expect them to sit and read every comic book that's ever, because you have to get acquainted with the character. You have to know what you're doing in that specific movie, but you don't have to know their entire backstory and what happens to them after they die and all this stuff. Like I don't expect you to do that kind of very intense research. Now, someone like a Nicolas Cage would probably read 10,000 comic books to prepare for a role, and that's fine. But there aren't a lot of people like that, and I don't expect them to be like that.
But also actors, again, because they're weird, sometimes they avoid watching projects in the universe because they don't want it to mix up with their own performance. Like, it'll complicate it if they have other things in their head. So, like,
fair.
So that happens all the time. But look at the Spider-Man. Like, if I believe more so that Tobey Maguire would have a hard time watching any of the Andrew Garfield movies or watching any of the Tom Holland movies because he has his experience with him and in his head, and he doesn't want to unfairly come in with some bias or like watch the other guys. Maybe it's hard for him to watch other people play the role that he made. Like, actors are weird.
Yeah.
They're weird.
They are.
So they'll have all kinds of reasons to not watch something, you know? And most actors don't even watch their own movies. So it's like, it's just, people need to relax because that kind of, it's, again, fun when they do know what they're talking about, but it doesn't matter.
But when they don't, it's kind of like, let's lay off them. You know, it's fine. They don't, people are busy. Dude, when we had a kid, when we had a baby, I don't know how actors and actresses who have children do anything. I don't know how they get anything done. It makes no sense to me. I can't comprehend it being gone for that long. And I have so much more respect for actor like a Chris Hemsworth with his children and taking all that time away and doing that. Like, and so do I expect him to watch 100 movies when he gets home? No, I expect him to spend time with his kids. That's what I expect him to do. And so that's kind of how I approach it now.
And you kind of want actors to do that because ultimately, if we can, selfishly as fans, want to see these actors as much as possible, they need to be at their healthiest in their own lives.
Yes.
So the fact that Hemsworth has talked about, he gave Hollywood 10 years. He moved back to Australia. He can still surf with his kids. He can still do outdoorsy stuff with his kids. And then he'll come back to the States when but like, even stand-up comedians,
I love that.
When a lot of the stand-up comedians I listen to on podcasts, like Chris DiStefano talks about this a lot, Joe List, a lot of these guys who have families, you know, stand-up comedians for the most part only go out on the weekends. So they'll get all week with their family, fly somewhere on a Thursday, and then come back on a Sunday. And even that is like a struggle. They're not filming 6-7 days a week on a movie set like actors are, but even comedians talk about, like, you know, I got this gig in Australia and I'd be there for 2 weeks, but like, I don't think I can do that because I'd be away from my family for 2 weeks, let alone 3 to 4 months shooting a movie. And it's like, and I'm sure sometimes families go with the actor, things like that, but it's like, that also means that are they going to dance practice? Are they participating on the baseball team or the dancer side? Like, it's tough. And so people like Ryan Reynolds, who can own a soccer team and sell a gin company and a cell phone company, it's like, yeah, that's just like a freak anomaly.
It doesn't make any sense to me. Like The Rock being like 50 places at once. It seems like he is sometimes. And then still, what it seems like, he's a good dad. He's a good family man. And I'm like, how do you do that? How do you? I would love to just ask your family, like, what is making him get away with this? What is pushing him to do this, man? Because I get tired now. We just have one baby girl, and I'm exhausted at the end of the day. Dwayne is flying around the country and running businesses and doing WWE and still finding time to raise his kids, man. That's super dad. That is absolutely super dad. It's impressive.
Yeah. Did you see where Lupita Nyong'o talked about how press junkets are like a personal hell for her? Did you see that?
I did, yeah.
And I saw a couple of guys that I actually respect, kind of like defend. I can't think of his name. Jake. He's got blonde hair. He's a really popular guy. I can't think of his last name. I think he does like the Cinema
guy
Blend
who
podcast.
He does interviews.
He's a really good-looking guy, blonde, slick back hair. His name's Jake. Jake's
great guy.
Jake's Takes, I think, is the name. So he was kind of like talking about how, You know, it was a little unfair to say that because these people come in and they only have 4 minutes to try to make something work. So I'll be honest here. I respect a guy like that because I think he knows how to give a good interview, and he's actually really good at his job. Kevin McCarthy's really good at it. I think that really good-looking dude, Chris Van Fleet or something like that. He's the guy who popularly asked Anne Hathaway how she lost weight. And she's like, what a forward. That guy, really good-looking guy. Big. Like, those guys are actually really good at press junkets. But let's be honest here. Lupita Nyong'o is right. Like, sure.
I agree.
Sure. They should figure out a new way how to do press junkets. 100%. I agree with that. Having people just file in one at a time, only get 4 minutes, it bores the shit out of the actors. Absolutely, that could be and should be fixed. At the same time, do better with the questions.
Sure.
There are enough examples of good interviewers. They stand out, rise to the top. Kevin McCarthy, Sean Evans on Hot Ones, all of these people, because they realize that they need to get creative with the interview questions. And also, you know, don't make them sing and dance like they're monkeys, these celebrities. Just try to ask different questions. And somebody like Frosty at Collider, who asks the worst questions in the world, needs to be stopped. I don't know how many times I've turned on a Frosty interview and I'm like, you've wasted everyone's time with these questions. You sit down with Kevin Feige. You sit down with Kevin Feige with 10 note cards of questions you know he can't answer, and that's how you spend your time, your 4 minutes. Bro, you've wasted everyone's time. Your own, Kevin Feige's, and the thousands of people that used to watch your channel. Those types of people need to be stopped. Like, come on. So I'm with Lupita Nyong'o on this, and Jake doesn't have to worry about it because he's one of the better ones. That's what I'll say.
I'm with you to a point on Frosty, and I actually haven't watched his interviews in a while. But part of me understands why he does what he does, because he's just trying to get a nugget. And if he manages to get a nugget, then that's going to be the biggest thing on Collider that week. Then people are going to be eating out of the palm of his hand. And so I wouldn't personally do that, which I look at interviews anyway. I've always had that mentality of, because I used to be a reporter. I was going to be a news anchor when I was in college. And so I can do it, but I have the mindset of, well, I don't want to waste their time. You know what I mean? I don't want to waste the actor's time. And that's how I've always thought of. And I know it's something I need to get over personally, but I kind of get why Frosty's does what he does. I wouldn't do it that way. And I do think there are way better ways to go about it. And there are numerous examples. And I also see a lot of the people, whether they're preparing for an interview for the first time or they've been really excited to be a part of this press junkets. Like, I get that. And I see that enthusiasm. And I'm so happy a lot of those people get a chance to do what they do. Now look at it from the actor's standpoint. You're getting asked the same thing over and over and over. And then you have to do another press junket in 2 weeks. And then you have to do another one. And it's all the same thing. And so from that standpoint, yeah, I do get what she's saying. And I kind of agree with what she's saying, to be honest with you. But there's also the side of it of these people, while they could definitely be doing a better job, that's for sure, some of them, they are just doing their jobs. And so I'm like, it's not. And it's the same thing. I look at sports, like sometimes coaches will answer questions that understandably get a very angry answer, but then sometimes they answer questions, but because they're upset, even though it was a good question, they lash out. And I'm like, that was a good question. The interviewer's just doing their job. I respect you. There's some of these coaches I really like, but I'm like, you need to chill out, because that's their job. You do your job. You coach. You let them ask questions. And so while this is a lot different, I understand why a lot of interviewers and interviewees get to that point and are so excited to do what they do. But yeah, you have to look at it from a human standpoint. And would a normal human, maybe not Tom Cruise because he's all about that, but would a normal human want to do 4 hours of straight interviews and be asked the same thing? And no, I wouldn't do it. I couldn't do it. I'd never want to do it. That's not the world I want to live in. And so I get it. She's just being a normal, rational human. But I do kind of understand. But hey, maybe if you took heavy offense to that, well, maybe you should be asking better questions. Maybe that's
yeah.
Maybe it's, maybe that's it.
Well, it's like the Disney Star Wars argument. We're going full circle here. It's like this person over here gets all this acclaim because he's great and unique and a different kind of interview. This person over here, has this approach and he's doing better, blah, 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 blah. When I ask questions, I never get any answers. So maybe just look inward and don't waste your time. And also, it doesn't take... Yeah. It only took me, 2 of these types of videos to realize that, like, when Kevin Feige reveals tidbits that people want, it's because he's enjoying the conversation. It's not because he's asked the right question. I mean, there's been times when he's been on the red carpet during a premiere and he's accidentally leaked something about a project coming up because he stumbled upon it, answering a different question. So it's like, just like talk to them, just talk. And then you'll like get something. Human. Or just come in with better questions. And then it's like, just make it more organic. You have to have some awareness. That should be part of your job. So I don't have any problem with what you just said, but part of these people just doing their job should be aware of what other people are doing. I mean, otherwise,
I agree with that.
Otherwise, what's the point?
I agree with that. And some people in our space don't have much awareness. I try to have awareness. Maybe sometimes I don't, but it's very evident that some people are just like, yeah, I'm asking the best thing right now, and when it's clearly not the best thing. And most of the time, the actors are smart enough to catch on to that, and they kind of toy around with it and play with it a little bit. And so that's why you see some actors come off as condescending, even though maybe it's deserving, if that makes sense.
And to be honest, I don't even really see actors acting up that much. I mean, it's not like...
Not a ton, but I see it.
I think for the most part, actors do a good job of, how she put it, coming up with different articulate answers for the same questions. I think actors are actually pretty good about it. Of course, we do things like meme, Sad Affleck, and stuff like that. But anyway. Whoever commented that this podcast knows what they're doing, you're right. What a great discussion that we had. Something that I thought we'd spend 10 seconds on. We just had a all-out discussion over it.
30 minutes.
All right, let's keep it moving. You saw Bad Boys Ride or Die. I did not. I would love to hear what your experience was like.
You mean Bad Boys for Life? Oh, no, it's Bad Boys Ride or Die, because for some reason For Life was number 3, and I keep wanting to say that. I love these 2 directors in this franchise specifically. Haven't really seen them much outside of it. I thought they did a nice job with the style of Ms. Marvel. There are some things about this movie that are very conventional, like the last one. I think the villain is frankly terrible. I believe the pacing suffers about halfway through the movie because they're trying to find out what, I guess, I don't want to reveal anything. It's not a spoiler video, but they're trying to figure out what's going to happen with the bad boys, and it takes some time to get there. But overall, I had a really good time with this. I mean, genuinely. And it's so funny because I wasn't excited for Bad Boys for Life, but I ended up having a great time with it.
Yep.
Wasn't super pumped about this. I don't know if it's the Will Smith fatigue that personally I'm not super feeling after the slap, because everybody's talking about that still, and I'm like, I'm over it. You know what I mean? I've kind of moved past that at this point in my life. That being said, I'm like, all right, let's see what he does with this role 2 or 3 years later, and can they add something new to it? And I think they do. I really do. They are no longer the bad boys that they were in the first 2 movies. They're aging. They're dealing with some things because they're aging. We saw a little bit with Martin Lawrence's character in the last movie, but we see it with Mike. We see it with Will Smith in this film. And both of them are going through some mental things, some physical things because of the fact that they're aging, but also because of what they've been through in the previous few movies. that becomes a big deal in the movie. And I like that. It's a different look to the classic buddy cop badass duo at the forefront. We're getting people who are little, they're not quite what they once were.
Right.
And they're probably facing the biggest threat that they've ever faced in this movie. And so you got to bring out all the guns for that. And you've got to use your brain a little more than you use your brawn. Even Mike, even Will Smith's character, which he hasn't done a lot of that. And so I loved that. And it's not, the typical, we're going to go after the bad guy and everybody's on our side and they know we're cool because we're the bad boys. No, there's some shady things going on at the place that they work, and they get framed. Of course, that's a little typical, little cliche, but they're framed and they're the ones on the run this time around. And they're adding in some other characters that are joining them on the run. That was really fun. And so while I don't like the Fast and Furious movies right now, I am not a fan of that franchise at this point in time.
Right.
They are kind of building this world like a Fast and Furious world with all of these characters, these mainstays, some supporting cast, and they're building up a little bit of a team in this film that could maybe go in that direction, less family, more just kind of a group of team. I think that works a lot better in this setting under these two directors than it has in any of the recent Fast and Furious movies. And so I'm actually excited to see where they go with it here. And I loved the action, the way that they film it, really creative. Some things that are a little shticky, to be honest with you. But overall, it looked great. And I just had a really great time with it, even though there are some clear flaws. The villain's terrible, awful, but thank God they're the ones that are at the forefront. And the movie's about them, not the villain. And so I enjoyed that.
I like what you said as far as building out the franchise more. I just hate the franchise you compared it to. I was just about to ask,
oh, me too.
I was like, are they going
agree.
Mission Impossible with this? But you went Fast and Furious on me. So
I would say Fast and Furious because it feels, while Mission Impossible is a little lighthearted at times, this is lighthearted on the level of Fast and Furious because they integrate a lot of. I think there are more ridiculous things in this movie than the last one and the last three, but more just like the back and forth between Smith and Lawrence, the comedic, heavy type of the way that the characters communicate. That reminded me of Fast and Furious. And now we're building a crew. And so that crew could take us into different films. But I hope it's better than Fast and Furious because I don't like that franchise right now, to be honest with you. So hopefully it's better.
Is Vanessa Hudgens in this movie?
Yes, she is.
Okay, good.
Oh, yeah.
I'm in.
One of the crew.
But what was the other thing I was going to ask? Oh, did you declare, is it better or worse than For Life?
I think it's a better overall story. I would still put For Life slightly ahead. I mean, it's a 1 percentage point difference in my score, if that means anything. I would put For Life ahead just because of the shock factor, how much fun that was getting back into the game. But this story of them going rogue is maybe the most interesting of the four so far. So that's a positive.
And Campia, he's the only other review I watched. He said something about the first half he struggled with, and then about halfway through, about the 45-minute mark, it just ramped up and was like balls out to the wall. Do you kind of share in that? The first half being
I could get behind that.
Okay, cool.
I could get behind that. There's something they try to do with Lawrence's character that's a little. It has to do with the things that he's going through mentally, but it's a little outlandish for a Bad Boys franchise. It didn't really feel like it belonged. And that's a heavy plot point in the first half. But I think I like the first half, what it sounds like, more than Campia. I felt like it stalled out in that middle portion before we get into that final 30 minutes of action, which was a great time. Oh, and there's one character moment with a very, very small character that we've seen in all of the Bad Boys movies almost, that is fan-freaking-tastic. So just be on the lookout for that. It was awesome.
Good deal. What do you make of the fact that it's projected to do 50 million this weekend, the week after we just wallered in all of the box office breakdown?
I get it. It's not as niche as Furiosa. Say what you will about Will Smith. I mean, the guy's still proven he's got it at the box office. And this is a long a mainstay franchise for a lot of people. A lot of people love Bad Boys, have continued to love Bad Boys through the years. It's ingrained in pop culture. And we mentioned social media last week with the stars. I think Will Smith has done a phenomenal job of getting the word out there on his social media about this movie. The behind the scenes videos they've released kind of reminding us of what they did with Mission Impossible. So I just think the marketing's been really, really good. Maybe not as in your face as some other big blockbusters. Like I don't see a trailer before every movie at the theater, but just on television and on social media and the viral vids and stuff like that, I think the marketing's been really superb. So it kind of surprises me that it's a lot higher than Furiosa, but it doesn't shock me that it is high, especially with that budget, man. It's going to make some great money with that smaller budget. It's only $100 million, which is pretty impressive.
Yeah, I agree. It's not shocking that it's doing better than Furiosa. I was just curious what you thought. But we're back, guys.
Yeah.
We're back. All right, let's take a break. And then when we get back, we will enter Hitman talk. We'll do non-spoiler first, and then we'll take another break and then wrap up with spoilers. We'll be right back, guys. All right, guys, we are back. We're going to talk everything Hitman without spoilers right now. So I remember when the movie was announced in the trades, it was around the same time that we were hearing about Fincher's The Killer. And that kept me from getting excited about this. Okay. And it's funny now that we fast forward through all this time, because I think the Glenn Powell train, it's like right now everybody's the most hyped they've ever been about Glenn Powell. We're several months removed from The Killer. And like even earlier this week, we got the trailer for another Hitman movie with Batista, The Killer's Game. So there was a time when I was like, yeah, do we really need another Hitman movie? And now it's kind of like, yeah, bring on all the Hitman movies. Like we're crushing them right now. I don't know. Did you ever kind of pick up on like, are we going to see a new phase of Hitman movies here?
What was first of all, did you like The Killer?
Oh, I loved it.
Okay, good.
Loved it. Yeah. I loved it in the context of what the rest of the movie year was like. I don't love it because I think it's like even top 5 Fincher.
Same.
But I still think it's a wonderfully crafted film that I love to watch.
Yeah, it's like trying to rank Scorsese's top 10 films. It's like, yeah, it may not be top 5, but it's still a absolute banger, and that's how Fincher's filmography is. And yeah, I'm right there with you. It was that was a great movie, but it was outside of my top 15-ish of last year. That being said, I had heard great things about Hitman. It premiered, can't remember which festival last year, but
TIFF, I think it was TIFF.
TIFF sounds right. And so I was expecting it for a long time to be a 2023 release. And once it got pushed, I'm like, Netflix? I heard so many good things about it, but Netflix? Like, why are they going to go all in on the awards and are they going to push Glenn Powell and things like this? And now that I've seen the movie, I wouldn't really say this is an awards type of film. And so now I understand the summer release date. Now I understand why it's a straight to streaming type of movie. But it's also really disappointing because I think this would be one that would be best with the crowd, with a lot of people, a big clapping and cheering and excitement. And I got to see a screening in Tennessee a couple weeks back. It wasn't a huge crowd because not a lot of people knew about it. But just from those, 15, 20 people in the theater, there were some cheers. There were some laughs, and I'm like, this is a great communal type of movie. So I am a little disappointed that it is on Netflix. But, initially, I think I was the opposite of you. I was really excited because the word of mouth was great about this movie. But it did set my expectations to think I was getting a different movie. And once I saw the movie, it wasn't necessarily that. But what I did get is, and we'll talk about it, a really fun, exciting romantic comedy with great stars, great chemistry, and one that I could see myself watching maybe 1 or 2 more times. I think this is a great date night movie. I'm going to get my wife to watch it with me whenever I can over the next week or 2, and I'm excited for her to see it. So that's the kind of movie that it is, and that's where I think it fits on Netflix, on streaming.
Yeah, I think it's a shame too, because Netflix is notoriously terrible with marketing and promoting. I actually think they've done a great job. I think
With
the
this one, yeah.
trailers have like really highlighted the idea that this is someone who used to who would dress up and disguise himself. And so I've heard that a lot of billboards around LA especially play up on that idea, where different Glenn Powell's are on different billboards, and they're kind of playing up that idea that he used to change the his role as a fake hitman working for the police. And so that kind of stuff, like, yeah, if you had given that to another studio and they had done that same thing but on a bigger scale, I mean, I just feel like it's a no-brainer that this. But at the same time, good on Netflix for taking it and running with it. So as much shit as we give streaming movies sometimes, like, it's not Netflix's fault that studios don't know what they have and don't know how to market things that they should be able to know how to market. So it's like, yeah, good. These are the kinds of things where I'm thankful for Netflix, because it's like, where else would this have gone? So yeah, so it's just one of those things. It does highlight the pros of streaming services, is that when studios fail us, we can just watch it at home. But I agree with you 100%. I mean, just to kind of go a little bit further into it, this movie is a complete meal. Like, it's a full meal. This is like the anti, and I'm sure you've done this a million times by now, but you watch a movie and you think, I wish we could have had this as a series so that we got more, so we had more meat on the bone and the concept was more fleshed out, because
more time.
Sometimes with a certain concept, there's a million different angles that you could play, and you want to make sure that you cover all your ground. This is what we're asking for when we say that we wish a movie was like a series, because it's like they did everything a Hitman series would do in an hour and 45 minutes. And it's just like, you don't need anything else. It is a full meal, and you are so satisfied by the end of it because of everything that they've accomplished here. I don't know. That's how I feel anyway.
I love watching a movie, and by the time it's over, you're like, man, I wish I could just spend a day with these characters. Just spend a day with them and hang out, have a conversation, see what they're like, past the point that we see them in the movie. And those are the types of likable characters that this film manages to create. A lot of that has to do with just the concept in general. I don't know if you heard about how hard it was for PAL to find a distributor and to find people to take this movie on. I watched a lot of behind the scenes clips, and he said they had a time selling this concept. Yeah. And I'm like, really? You had a time selling this concept? Because just as a concept, not even looking at the product, it sounds cool. It sounds interesting. It sounds fun. And maybe it's Powell wanted to be the guy the whole time, and studios weren't looking at him like that. And so, well, let's do it and let's get somebody else. Powell's feeling really confident. I can do this. I can play this role. And he can. He's proven that now. But he said once he got Linklater, that's when people were kind of turned on by the idea. Linklater immediately comes in, helps with the script, works some things out. And that's when it became what it ultimately became. And I think this concept is so freaking sellable, man. When you talk about Netflix, I think it's so funny that they don't market a movie like Atlas, right? Maybe the stars speak for themselves, but it ends up being watched by millions and millions of people, and it got more eyes than something like Furiosa. They don't market Sweet Tooth. The show with the little boy that Robert Downey Jr. is coming, blah, blah, blah. I didn't know season 3 was coming out this week. I have the critics' website access, and I didn't know it was coming out this week. It's in the top 10. How does that happen when they didn't market it? They've mastered being able to market these things after their release. But the cool thing about Hitman is they did such a good job prior to the release with the trailers and just the cool posters and the behind-the-scene things and Glenn Powell being such a marketable guy, and really the whole cast being marketable. And now that it's on Netflix, I think this should easily be the number 1 film for the next 2 weeks on the platform. Well, that and Godzilla -1.
I just realized, isn't Anyone But You on Netflix right now?
And it's huge. on Netflix.
Yeah.
It's huge.
So it's like, yeah, that's going to definitely help it.
Yeah.
100%. So what I will say to kind of piggyback off my point is I do think it would be nice to get like a true crime podcast that actually told the true story of the gentleman that Glenn Powell was portraying. Because and they kind of make a joke about it. I won't spoil what it is, but they do make a joke at the end, like, and they talk about what they did embellish and what they kind of fabricated for the movie itself. But like, if you had done like a podcast to coincide with it that actually told the real story and kind of interviewed those people, that would have been really cool too to market.
Yeah.
But and it's not too late; they can still do it. But yeah, I wonder, do you think it's, I don't mean to sound morose, but do you think it would have been easier to market if the gentleman was still alive that the movie was based on? Like if they were actually able to interview the real story?
Maybe. I think because a lot of people are going to watch this and not even know it's based on a true story until they see it is. And then they're like, oh, okay, that's interesting. I mean, maybe, but we've seen examples of this before where the person's no longer with us and it still manages to have success. So I think it's possible if people were able to learn more about it, but at the same time, you could watch this never knowing it's based on a true story and still have the same amount of fun. And that comes with embellishment. That comes with some things that they're obviously taking over the top, because this is a movie that relies heavily on comedy at points, but they didn't do it to where I think it detracts from the true story and to where it's going to piss people off. And so it's a great balance. And again, you bring in somebody like Linklater, you're always going to get a lot of respect with him, with a script, and you can feel that while you're watching.
And to be fair, this is actually based on an article about the person that it's, so there is like supplementary material on this. So it's not like, but I don't know, like a podcast or like hearing, like if the guy had written a book, maybe that's true. I haven't even looked it up, but I just think like this story is so cool that hearing like a true crime sort of podcast about it would have been really nice. But anyway, let's talk about the movie and not that kind of stuff. So first of all, I'm a little behind on the bromance between Linklater and Powell. I still have not seen Everybody Wants Some to date, but I'm assuming you have. So this is new to me. Did I just stumble upon like another like Gosling winding Refn type of like bromance here? Because it's like, after seeing this, it's like, yeah, these two should always work together. This is awesome.
I hope so. If you listen to Powell in these interviews, I mean, obviously he's embellishing it, but he's sitting there saying, yeah, who's your favorite director? It's Linklater. Yeah, I mean, the guy's sitting right next to him, so of course he's going to say that. But you can tell there's something there. There's a connection, and I've seen that connection many a times with an actor and a director, and we often see them work together in numerous projects. And I thought Powell was excellent in Everybody Wants Some. I thought that movie, while I had some pacing problems, I think for the most part really, really worked on a level that Linklater's better films do. And it's funny because you go back to those so long ago. I mean, I forgot Powell was in The Dark Knight Rises. I forgot Powell was in, wasn't he in one of the Spy Kids movies when he was young, a kid? I'm pretty sure he was in the third one. So this guy's been in the industry a long time. All of a sudden, 3 to 4 years ago, he's in everything. He's had this movie star quality. And I think Linklater was one of the first directors in Everybody Wants Some to kind of bring that out. And so now I feel like we're going to see numerous projects between the two. I would like to. And I'm telling you right now, Ryan, this guy's going to win an Oscar in the next 5-6 years. I'm telling you, Glenn Powell is going to win an Oscar. He's going to find that role. He's going to find that Gosling role where Gosling started to get those nominations over and over and over, because he reminds me a lot of Ryan Gosling, and he's going to start doing these directors, whether it's a Gerwig or maybe he's in a Scorsese movie one of these days, something like that, and he's going to get that nomination. I'm telling you, he's that kind of actor.
No, I agree 100%. So we both have already, within 10 minutes, made Gosling comparisons to
You're right. Yeah,
to
that's
this.
True. That's
so true. Yeah, I agree 100%. This is a Ryan Gosling movie if it's 10 years ago.
For sure.
But yeah, what a special thing. And also to, again, find out he produced it. And, I heard an anecdote about how he was sort of the guy on the Everybody Wants Some set that other actors would tell Glenn Powell to pitch Linklater on certain things they should do within a scene. And so he was like the guy on set. And then you also hear how Glenn Powell would actually surprise Linklater on set with the character personas that his character played in this movie. So Linklater didn't know what Glenn Powell was going to do with these individual versions of the Hitman.
Awesome.
And so he was the one that actually got the costumes together and things. And I was like, that's such a unique thing.
Wow.
But if, I mean, he was a producer, so it's not like any actor can do that. But that's still risky. But the fact that like you hear about a director letting an actor do that, it's like, wow, that's actually, he has a lot of confidence in this dude. And also, again, to give Netflix a little bit more credit, I think the first time Glenn Powell really sort of broke out a little bit was that Set It Up movie, which was that big Netflix rom-com. So I think Netflix knows as well that Glenn Powell's the man. And so having 3 Glenn Powell movies on their service right here, right now, it's good for them too. So anyway.
I just rewatched, by the way, I rewatched Set It Up. I did a podcast with Rachel from Rachel's Reviews on the Hallmarkies podcast. We did our top 10 rom-coms on Netflix. And man, I like that movie. I really like that movie. It's such a fun romantic comedy, really good performances, great chemistry. So Powell's always had that. And it's funny because he's in all these romantic comedies, but I feel like the guy's got so much range that he's not been able to showcase yet. And, you know, he did this role where he was able to play multiple characters. Now, it's a smaller part of the film than what I expected it to be. And before the movie came out, I was saying, just from the posters and the trailer, before the movie came out, I was saying, man, if this came out in the 90s, this would have been a Jim Carrey movie. Because Jim Carrey would have taken all those characters and absolutely just dominated this role. But after seeing the film, it's much less of that and much more of, once they kind of get out of that after the first act, and we'll talk about it with spoilers, it's almost pure rom-com. And so that fits Powell better than I initially thought it would, just from the trailers and the posters. And so Powell ended up being, I think, the perfect choice for this role, and he knocked it out of the park in that way.
You know, it's funny. A couple of years ago, watching Top Gun Maverick, I watched that movie and just thought, whoever this guy is, he's great at playing this douchey character.
Excellent.
Without knowing anything about that actor, I'm going in loving Tom Cruise. I'm loving Miles Teller. So he's just kind of the D-bag that's messing with my boys. And it's so funny because the more I watched the film, which, you know, is 4 times at theaters, and I've watched it, you know, probably 10 times at home. It's like you just love how great he is for the movie. And then that's when you're like, yeah, I want to see what else this guy does. And then Anyone But You, and now this, and it's just great and exciting how quickly he's become like the guy for all of us.
Isn't it funny that
like, he's the guy?
Miles Teller's, most of his roles, he's kind of a jerk in his roles. And then in Top Gun, he's the really likable, ends up being the hero at the end of the movie. Whereas in Top Gun, Glenn Powell's like the jerk. Yet in almost every other project I've seen him in, he's the really likable, charming guy. And so it's really fun to see the roles reversed in Top Gun Maverick now that we have context. But it is weird how Glenn Powell has actually become, I'd say at this point, a little bigger than what Miles Teller is at this point in their careers. And so that's funny that Teller hasn't went on to do 3 or 4 more big projects. It's been Glenn Powell's world, man. It's crazy.
Yeah, I agree. He's definitely hotter at the current moment.
Oh yeah. He's a good looking guy.
Well, that too.
This is a good. No, I mean, I'm telling you, and you texted me, folks. Ryan texted me this morning, and he's like, "Listen, this guy makes me feel like I need to go to the gym," and I had the exact same reaction. Part of that could be my wife watching the trailer with me, going, "Man,
I gotta get back.
What are you manning about, woman? Man, that's a good looking guy." And I'm like, you know what, honey? I love you, and I completely agree. That's a good-looking man. When he takes his shirt off in this movie, I'm like, Deck, why can't I look like that? I will never reach that pinnacle of manliness, Ryan. I'm sorry. I'm sweating over here. Continue.
I think you could. Yeah, I got to get back to the gym. I got to get back on carnivore. I need my carbs to look like him. But
For sure. Yeah.
I need to cut back on the soda, get my creatine back in my routine. Anyway,
that'll do it.
I'm going to the gym later just because of him.
Me too.
I also kind of like how this movie, and we've kind of mentioned this in the trailers, how he does take on these different personas. You know, I like how it's kind of like a commentary on acting as well. And I think that's one of the ways why I like Glenn Powell so much. You know, when you hear him speak about his self-awareness and how he views himself within the context of Hollywood, and I just really respect this guy because he doesn't seem like he's this fluffy actor who's full of himself. I just think he doesn't think of himself. He doesn't take himself too seriously. He just seems like he's a guy. He's just a man. And I like that. He talked about how he doesn't see himself playing a superhero role or whatever. He doesn't want to play a game. He just wants to make the movies he wants to make. And I just think that's awesome. And he just is somebody that I think we kind of talked about that too. We kind of talked about how we wanted the Chris's to be a little bit more like that last week. But anyway, I think Glenn Powell just already has his head on straight, and he's just gonna stay cool.
I hope so. I'm waiting for that thing to come out, you know, because this guy can't be this cool. Like, he can't be this genuine and kind and nice. There's got to be something to come out, right? But it's funny. I think this kind of, you look at Linklater's history with, you know, lead actors and people that he's worked with, and Jack Black and now Glenn Powell. Like, he has a history of working with just really good people and really awesome, genuine people. And anytime I see Linklater interact with the actor in whatever movie he's promoting, it always feels like they really get along. And so I think a lot of this is a testament to Linklater's ability to pick the right kind of people for the role, but also just genuinely good dudes and you can always tell in these behind the scenes interviews that they always had the best chemistry. Like, he and Jack Black and he and Glenn Powell seemed to be really good friends. And when McConaughey was in whatever that movie was, Bernie, they seemed to get along really good behind the scenes. And I'm like, I really like Richard Linklater. Just as a human being, I really like him.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned McConaughey because that's where I was going. I think he just found this generation's McConaughey.
Ooh, you know, I like that.
You know, they did Dazed and Confused, and McConaughey went into rom-coms. But I think Glenn Powell was able to see what happened to McConaughey and how McConaughey kind of became a meme of himself with those rom-coms. And McConaughey eventually rejected that, and then he had to have a reconnaissance. And I think Glenn Powell has the awareness that he learned from all of that. And that's why I think Glenn Powell has the attitude that he has, is that he's not going to play the game and try to become some type of actor or movie star. Like, I genuinely think that this is the new McConaughey, who learned from the old one. So anyway.
So you're going to see him in the rom-coms, right? But you're not going to see him do 10 years of that and then pivot. You're going to see him do the rom-coms and the Oscar things and maybe some non-superhero action movies because he says he doesn't want to be a superhero. I think this guy is on the right trajectory and path to becoming, in 2 to 3 years, maybe the biggest star in Hollywood.
Well, it's not like it was all bad with McConaughey in the rom-coms. McConaughey does a couple, and it's like, yeah, he is this guy from Texas, like Glenn Powell.
Down to earth.
He has massive sex appeal, like Glenn Powell.
All right.
He gets stuck in the rom-coms. He gets stuck with the female audience. Glenn Powell peppered it in, grabbed him, and I just think he's going to benefit in the long run from having seen that career first.
That's funny. It's also funny you say that. I don't know if you watch college football because Pat McAfee does these sideline reportings for the biggest games. And 1 week Texas played. He had McConaughey on the sideline. McConaughey was going crazy. It was awesome. So much fun. I am not kidding. I think it was 2 weeks later Texas played. Pat McAfee had Glenn Powell on the sidelines. Yeah. And it was this enthusiasm. It's the same type of personality that McConaughey had. And I think
Mhm.
they were both promoting projects, but it was really cool to see him just go outside of the bubble and be at a
Right.
sports event. And he's doing these cool interviews and he's doing these social media things. It's like, I think Powell, he understands how to work his stardom and how to broaden his horizons in terms of that fandom. It's not just the movies with him. And so that's really cool. I like seeing him do things outside of that as well.
I don't take in a lot of movie content. I will watch the John Campea show out of spectacle when Robert Meyer Burnett is on. But other than that, I really only listen to a couple of podcasts from The Ringer and the rewatchables and the Big Picture being the most notable ones. And Glenn Powell is very aware of The Ringer and their podcast. He talks about them. And he actually is a guest on this week's episode of The Big Picture where they review Hitman, and then Linklater and Glenn Powell are on the show. So they've been talking. So the first run of press that Maverick did before the next COVID delay and it got pushed again, like when Maverick was originally released, they did a big press release and they had to sit down with the Ringer. And ever since then, the Ringer and Glenn Powell have been all in on each other. But and every now and then, he'll mention the Big Picture or vice versa. And I just like how, first of all, me and Glenn Powell listen to the same podcast, but I like how he actually listens to what people are talking about in the movie industry and in Hollywood. And I just like that. I appreciate that about my favorite celebrities. So I just figured I'd mention that. But anyway, so if anybody's curious and they want to hear Glenn Powell and Linklater talk, it's on The Big Picture.
You can tell he cares. And I'll mention another thing too. It's not just his on-screen presence. Glenn Powell's written numerous scripts that he said in an interview have been rejected multiple times. And Hitman was one of those projects that made it through. And he's, heavily involved on screen, but he's also, it seems like he's a pretty talented writer as well. So this guy's just so all around well-faceted guy. And I think he's going to make an impact behind the camera in numerous ways that people may not expect, right? You've got Greta Gerwig, you've got your Noah Baumbach, you've got people that do both. Gerwig does both. She does a great job at both. I could see Powell having a hand in some really cool scripts down the line and maybe getting his Oscar nom that way. That'd be cool.
Well, it's like, and what we talked about even off air, how we feel like Glenn Powell is the one actor who in this new generation is like taking what they've learned from Cruise and running with it. Like I'm sure every actor on Maverick learned a ton from Tom Cruise, but like Glenn Powell is like the guy who watched the 4-hour lecture that Cruise made, and it really just seems to be a student of that too. So he just kind of takes it all in, and I like that a lot.
I think about this. Chalamet takes all of his notes from Leonardo DiCaprio and some of that being passed down through the generations. Powell doing the same thing for Tom Cruise. I mean, it's just really cool that we're seeing these big celebrities kind of pass the torch, and they're not gone, but pass the torch in a way to where a new generation can kind of have that flavor to their filmography. I think that's really cool to me, and I would love if Powell took some elements from all of these actors and became that next big thing. And he's in the same boat as your Chalamets, your Butlers, your Zendayas. That's the new generation of performers, and I love to see it. I really do.
He's definitely as exciting as everyone you just listed, but I think personally he's the guy I'm gravitating towards the most, just based on everything that we've talked about. Like, I don't know how to get much more excited about Austin Butler as an actor, other than like I'm excited to see everything he does. But like as a person and a personality as well, I'm just like, yeah, Glenn Powell's he's the guy. So.
I would push back on that. I think I'm excited to see Austin Butler grow out of that accent. That's going to be really exciting. I can't wait.
To kind of go back to what I mentioned about how this movie also kind of seems to be a commentary on acting, to kind of open up the review portion a little bit more, do you believe that the self is a construct?
God. Sure. I mean, look at the way that, and we were talking about this off air the other day, the way that I approach the Austin Burke you see on camera is not always the Austin Burke that is in real life, but sometimes those versions of each other mesh and mix and match. And I have almost become the entity that I have created on my YouTube channel in a way, and that has kind of changed me as a person. And so, yeah, I was watching this movie, and I'm like, it is interesting to see Gary and Ron, and then not to dive too deep into spoilers, but just kind of become those similar versions of it. I'm trying not to spoil this, but it's just so cool seeing that play out in that movie, and then me being able to relate that to my life on a smaller scale, obviously. But yeah, that was a really fun. And he's a philosophy teacher in the movie, and he actually asks some very intriguing questions at the beginning of the film. So I found that to be really cool.
I agree with you 100%. I mean, when I look at my personal growth over the last 10 years, even, I mean, I see so many differences, and but it's all, it's the cliche stuff. Like, there's lessons learned. I was more selfish 10 years ago. I'm more selfless now. There's like things that I've just matured, things that you expect from somebody who's normal. But at the same time, I have this unused lyric that I plan on using in one of my future songs. But I had this unused lyric about my relationship with a woman at the time, and I was basically, it's about like getting that person back after a long extended period of time. But I say, I can't remember the version of me you fell in love with. Like the idea that you've been different things to different people, and through that constant reconstructing, and I mean, maybe fake's not the best word, but through all of that, you forget, and you're like, wait, who was I in that moment? I got to get back to that. And it's not something that you're supposed to be able to know. But anyway, I was thinking a lot about that too. And again, it's about acting. And even Austin Butler is a good example of that too. It's like, going into Elvis, and it's like, we're talking about, does he still hold on to that? Is it permanently him now? Like, it's fascinating to think about that, but it's so true that the self is absolutely a construct, 100%.
It's so funny.
I loved it.
Do you know, Ryan, when you first met me, you probably got more of a hint of this than now, obviously. So I grew up in Eastern Kentucky, where all of our accents were very heavily, not Southern, I would say hillbilly-ish, hillbilly-esque. It's a very distinct, not in a dumb way, occasionally, but it's a very distinct way of speaking. And I had a heavy accent, a very heavy accent 10 years ago, going into college and all of those things. And I actually took a class in college because I was going to be a news reporter to kind of wean myself off of that accent, because they say, well, you can't be on air if you sound like that, even though I turn on WKYT and everybody sounds like that. So what did they learn? But I have essentially done away with that accent on my own through my YouTube channel, and I no longer have it off my YouTube channel. So I have changed the way I changed the way that I was speaking for this purpose, solely for this purpose, but it changed the way I speak in real life.
Yeah.
It's changed me entirely. And now I go back and I listen to the way I used to talk and the way that other people, when I go visit family in Eastern Kentucky, I start to slip back into it. But I listen to them now and I'm like, that's how I used to sound. It's fascinating how I have changed my projection, and it's changed the way that I talk and project to people in my everyday life over the last 10, 15 years. It's really fascinating. And so I can't make fun of Butler too hard, because I guess I've kind of done it too. So,
I don't know if you remember this, but shortly after we met, because I think you had graduated college at the time, after we met. But
yeah,
and I made a joke. I don't know if it was on air or not, but I made a joke that I nicknamed you the Movie Methodist.
The Movie Methodist.
Because
I remember that.
when you talked about movies, it sounded like you also had this like spiritual, like ministry type of voice to you or something. Just because, I don't know, I related to like a Southern Baptist like youth minister, the way that I don't know, the Movie Methodist. Guys, if you're wondering what Austin Burke is like off camera,
oh man,
a little more tired.
That's
just more tired.
Well, I've always had that though, man. I mean, because I grew up speaking, I I was always speaking on stage and always projecting, and I wanted to be
Yeah.
in the news industry. And so I had this projecting voice that has essentially I've integrated into my everyday life. And yeah, I'm not as enthusiastic off air, but man, it's just it's strange how I am an amalgamation of my different personalities and what they used to be, 10, 15 years ago. I've grown into one entity. And it's just so crazy to me, man. It's crazy. So this movie opened up a lot of those questions, self-reflecting in that way.
One thing I missed from the trailer, I didn't like follow the marketing. I saw the trailer when it came out, and I've just been excited for the movie. But I think one crucial detail I missed from the trailer going into this is I thought that he was actually a hitman. I didn't realize.
Me too.
Okay. Yes. So I thought that he was an actual hitman, and he stumbled upon somebody that he fell in love with, and then anyway. But that's not what the movie's about. It's based on a true story about how a full-time philosophy teacher freelanced for the New Orleans PD on the side. He started off as a technician and then got thrown into coercing people who were trying to hire hitman to kill loved ones or what have you. And he found himself doing this for the New Orleans Police Department. And I'll tell you what, I kind of mentioned it before, but they kind of cover all of their ground when it comes to exploring this idea. There are a couple of times, certain scenes where I nitpicked a few things, and we'll kind of open up that a little bit. But for the most part, I feel like we saw this guy who's very unique. He started off sort of as I don't want to say a loser, but he was just kind of like a normal dude, unsuspecting dude. And he just had this inclination for excelling when you put a spotlight on him. And then he just kind of finds himself too far deep into this world. And you see this full blown transformation with this guy. And I also didn't expect that it does feel like 2 or 3 different types of movies. There are definitely romantic comedy elements. There's dark comedy in here, but also there's times when it's like a workplace drama, and it's like there's all kinds of different sort of facets, and it kind of changes and ebbs and flows depending on what kind of scene you're in and who else. And it was insanely fun to watch because of that.
There's a neo-noir flavor to it as well, because he's kind of narrating certain points in the movie, and obviously not the black and white, but just the way that the movie is constructed, it felt like a noir. Right. But it's just so fascinating how they're mixing that with a rom-com, with a bit of a thriller at times, with a handful of action elements. That was my big fear, as I was thinking, man, I hope people don't go into this expecting an action movie, expecting what we saw last year from Fincher, because it's not that.
It's not Fall Guy. It's not The Killer. No. It's not Fall Guy.
No. But it doesn't need to be. And what it is such a beautiful blend of those things, and such a fun blend. And that's the word I keep using when I come back to this movie, is it's just a lot of fun. And a lot of that starts with Pal, but we have to talk about both of them. And the chemistry between them is spectacular. I thought Maddie was a really fun character. When she's introduced, she's introduced in one way, but it turns out she's much smarter in a way. Some of the decision making I question, but also much more entrenched in the situation than I expected. And that was really surprising. And that was a great surprise. And I think it turned this movie into something more, because while most of the movie was cliche rom-com, predictable story type thing, I thought the last 15, 20 minutes were really shocking. And so I'm like, that was cool. But again, that goes with the decision making and what they had these characters doing. And all of it made sense. Nothing the characters did, even as stupid as some of the decisions were out of character. They all made the same mistakes that I expected them to make.
Madison is played by, I might butcher it, Adria Arjona, excuse me, from Andor. And she, I think, is the main reason why you are correct with your last point. No, I'm just going to be honest here, just like I was when we talked about the Acolyte. The one thing I need in my life
Here we go.
is a Latina that says to me, "Let's go dance, white boy." So I thought she was dope watching Andor, but in all seriousness as well, this is crucial for the movie. This movie is super sexy at times.
Yeah.
Like it should, in certain scenes, it should get just as much credit for being as sexy as Anyone But You is, or Anyone But You can be. This movie also deserves to be in that category because they have genuine chemistry.
Awesome chemistry.
It's an insanely steamy type of movie, especially in certain scenes, and you buy into it. Because again, part of the allure is that you're watching a guy find a version of himself who's successful with this insanely hot woman who is deeply flawed.
Yeah.
But in a way, when you're an audience member, you're like, yeah, I know why he's doing what he's doing because he's looking at her. And it's just like, it sounds silly, but it's true. And that's half of why you buy this movie, is because of how great she is in the role. Tremendous actress, great in the role. Also is playing someone who's intentionally and seriously hot. And you can kind of overlook the craziness. And then there's the dark comedy aspect of that too. It's like, how much can someone this beautiful get away with? And that's 100% part of the DNA of this movie.
It's so funny while watching this. I don't tend to gravitate towards a lot of romantic comedies because normally it's fantastical versions of people falling in love with a fantastical version of a person, meaning the hottest person falling in love with the hottest person, and they seem like they're, just these sculpted human beings, and nothing really goes wrong in their lives. Maybe one thing's going wrong and that leads them to each other, this and that. Well, here in this movie, our character is a nerdy philosophy teacher, but he's living this fake, this falsified fantasy where essentially it is that rom-com. That's what we're seeing play out, is the two really hot people falling in love with each other and getting that chemistry and everything. But the caveat there is that's not him. That's not Gary.
Right.
That's Gary as Ron. And so that adds another layer to this rom-com that allows it to stand out as a bit of a different rom-com. And then where they go with these two characters is not often a decision or a series of decisions that you see rom-com characters make. And so I just thought that was so cool, man. It manages to distinguish itself. It's so different from other movies we've seen in the genre in that way, even though it is familiar. And I love that. I think that's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I do want to make sure people understand that it's not strictly a rom-com like Anyone But You is. Like, that is let's say it's 1/3 of the type of movie it is. Because then there's kind of an aspect to it. It doesn't get as serious, but it's like there's a little bit of the town in this. Like how much Affleck has to do with Rebecca Hall. Rebecca Hall's character. So there's different facets to this too. And I think what makes it so engaging is the roller coaster of emotions, because it's also one of those movies that you're involved in as an audience member. Like, oh my God, this is going to happen. And I mean, there's times I'm sitting in my living room doing this, like, oh my God, this is about to happen. This is about to happen. And sometimes it happens the way I anticipate. And sometimes another crazy thing happens and it flips everything on its head. It's a very involved movie in that way. Yes. And that's also something I didn't expect. The main reason why I didn't expect it is because that's not how Netflix streaming movies typically feel. Granted, Netflix didn't produce this movie, like Atlas, for example. It's not the same viewing experience that you watch with Atlas. Mm-hmm. Atlas is a movie that you have on and you can do your laundry while watching it. This is not like that. So anyway, it was able to, I mean, I was thoroughly entertained and engaged, on the edge of my seat. I won't use that word. I was intrigued by the hot people. It's kind of got everything, to be honest. And I really, really loved it.
Yeah, it does. Do you think do you see it as rewatchable? I mean, obviously it sounds like you do, but because I see this as a rewatchable, down the line, a year from now, here's a rom-com I'm going to watch every year, maybe. And because I have those now from the last several years. I think Game Night is a comedy that I go back to
100%.
on a yearly basis. And I feel like this will be a rom-com / mystery crime / thrill. I mean, everything that I will revisit maybe on a yearly basis. And maybe just saying that, maybe I should put it a little higher on my end of the year list, because I have it in the top 10, but I really, really love this experience.
I texted my sister immediately, who's a Glenn Powell head as well, probably different reasons. I texted her, told her to watch it on Netflix, and I can guarantee you I'll watch that movie again this week.
With her. Yeah.
Well, no, not with her, just in general. Like, I want to rewatch, to answer your question, just to rewatch the movie.
Nice.
I cannot wait to watch it again. I'm just going to go on, if we want to go on and wrap the non-spoiler talk.
Yes.
I put this in my top 3 of the year instantly.
Nice.
Didn't even think about it. Right below Challengers. I mean, just such a similar experience, and it's crazy that one was in the theaters and one wasn't. And what was the other point I was going to make? I don't remember. I loved it. Instantly top 3 of the year so far for me. It's surprising to me that if I've seen a few of the Letterboxd heads that I follow, they've been kind of giving it varying reviews. I'm kind of shocked by that. I thought it was an instant 5 stars. I see like a 3.5. I see a 4-star, and I'm like, what? Did we watch the same movie?
Well, I could see 3.5. I could see that, because there are some things about it, the way that it flows in the middle portion, the way that they are only giving you a little bit of that, just a taste of him playing the different roles in it, because that was pitched to me as that's going to be most of the movie, and that wasn't most of the movie. That was the smallest part of the movie, and then it gets into their relationship, and that takes a while to build. And so I could see that. I didn't feel that. The pacing didn't really bother me, but I could definitely see somebody 3.5. I've seen a lot of 3 stars on Letterboxd, and that to me is like, crazy. All right, 3-star, okay movie, never going to revisit, not really that fun. It's like, I don't see that in this. I see really, really fun. And I have it right now as a fringe top 5 movie of the year for me. But it may work its way up to like at least 4, because my top 3 are pretty set in stone right now, with Dune, Challengers, Furiosa. But I could see this at 4 or 5, because of the other films. Civil War I really loved, Late Night with the Devil I really loved, and this I really loved. They're all in the same category, but a great film, an absolutely fantastic experience, and one that I am so pumped to go back to.
100%. Sorry about that, but yeah, Dune, Challengers, Hitman are my top 3, and I think that like the only couple of nitpicks, I'll go on and mention them. The only thing that I don't necessarily buy at the top when you meet Glenn Powell as Gary is that I don't expect Gary to be as muscular as Glenn Powell is. That's the only thing. So it's like,
no, yeah.
Glenn Powell has the haircut, the floppy haircut, the glasses, the dorky polo and jorts, but it's like he's also ripped underneath all that. And it's like, okay. And then there's a scene where, so again, we're kind of talking about guys, the double life he's kind of living because he's charading along Adria Arjon's character. The one thing I don't buy is that because he's already working for the police department, you know that he's visited a gun range, and then he finds himself back at the gun range with her. And I was anticipating an employee recognizing him, and they don't even like do that. Like, guys, don't get me wrong. There are definitely other scenes where people he doesn't want to see out in public, he sees, and, you know, there's a lot of conflict there. So it does happen, but I just expected that in that specific scene. But also that scene means something else that we'll talk about in the spoiler discussion. Do you want to go on and break for that?
Yeah. We'll come back to
it. Guys, if you don't want this movie spoiled, don't listen anymore. You got an almost 2-hour podcast without it, so we did you good. All right. Spoiler time. So, that's when I started to realize, actually, that shooting range scene. That's when I started to realize what this movie was going to ultimately become, when I
Mm-hmm.
was engaged as a viewer. Because that's when I started thinking, like, yeah, he's got a point. It's really weird that all of a sudden she was the one that came up with the idea that they should romantically stay inside and not go. But it's like, but the one thing she wants to do with them is learn how to shoot a gun. And I was like, who is this character becoming? And that's when I was like, oh my God, the possibilities and the things that we can explore here is like, how does someone engage after they found out their lover is a hitman? Because it's not something you can just put to rest and ignore. So it's like from there on, dude, it's like a blast trying to figure out what's going to happen next. And oh my God, that's when I started really finding myself involved.
I expected her to almost do the opposite, figure out, or obviously see him as a hitman at the beginning, but when they were starting to fall in love, be the kind of person that's like, no, don't do that. I want you to, be a good person, and being a hitman makes you a bad person and all this stuff. But it's almost like, I mean, that scene where he pulls out the gun on those two guys, she's like behind him, grabbing his arm. She's like, God, I love this. This is sexy. Like, oh, she's into it. And you tell she's into it. And she's turned on. And so that she's like embracing this life. And unknowingly, he is embracing this life behind the scenes because he's not the actual guy that she thinks he is. So they're both coming to terms that this is the life that they like. And I'd say it takes him a little bit longer because once everything is revealed, he's like, I don't want any part of this. What are you doing? My name's Gary. I'm not cool. So that was really funny and fun to see. And that also felt really realistic for his character. But as they both come to terms with who they actually are, at least a little part of them is, that's when it started to really flourish for me, man. I will say, I wanted to mention this in the non-spoiler portion. I wanted to see more of Gary as the philosophy teacher. I wanted more scenes because I found those scenes to be so fascinating. And every time we would go back to them, I love the way that the students would react to the questions, but I also love the way that the questions would tie into what inevitably happens with his character. And so maybe there wasn't a place for more of that, but I felt that's when the movie had this nice flow to it that I really wanted to revisit more than we actually did. It's funny because Linklater does this very well with the School of Rock, Jack Black in front of the class. Same thing here, some great comedic timing there. And so, yeah, I could have used more of that. But yeah, just embracing themselves was really cool to see.
And guess what other movie, you'll appreciate this. I kind of can't believe you didn't just reference it. Guess what other movie those scenes reminded me of?
What? I don't know.
Another Round.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Okay. That's one
where
of my faves.
he kind of becomes a different self, and his students kind of notice it. And anyway, by the end, Glenn Powell might as well be Indiana freaking Jones with his students painting the "I love you" on their eyes. But
yes,
but I think that I don't necessarily agree that I needed more of it, but I do. I think that they were actually crucial because I think the last scene when they're in the park. When they're sort of they're talking about how historically sometimes taking people out has actually been beneficial. So, I mean, I think that scene is crucial into understanding the transformation of the character. And that's sort of what I wanted to ask you. Do you think the 3.5 stars and 4 stars, do you think part of it is because they don't fully buy into the transformation of this character? Like, how can someone go from being a philosophy teacher to wrapping somebody up in a plastic bag and waiting for him to die?
Maybe. And part of that is, I don't know if you hear a baby in the background. She's crying upstairs. Part of
I hear her.
It's slightly distracting. Part of this is me looking at the transformation and what they actually do at the end, as that is such a drastic philosophy change from who he is at the beginning and the type of guy that he is. And so that did feel a little outlandish to me personally.
Yeah.
And so not enough to detract from my enjoyment of the film. But I could see someone watching that and saying, yeah, that's a bit much. That is a major character change. That is a a change in someone that doesn't feel realistic over the span of an hour and 40 minutes and the way that they were telling the story. And her as well, because she's the one doing it before he's doing it. And that was that was a jump. But again, we get those moments, and we get those integral pivots in their character, and we get those things that are set up, and we get the teaching of these classes that point to these questions that he's asking being answered. And that's what I thought Linklater did so well, is he does as well as you possibly could have to explain these character transformations by planting those seeds in the beginning. And while a lot of it is drastic, admittedly on my end, he planted the seeds there, both of them, Powell as well, planted the seeds with this script, and the script did a nice job of tying it all together. So I think a third watch, I think a third watch will do a lot to second watch for a lot of people in kind of transforming the way that you perceive their actual arcs, because there is a lot to their arcs. I know it's just a silly, funny movie. No, these characters go through drastic changes, and they take a life.
Yeah.
In this movie, they take a life. So what more would they do after that? It's untelling because of who they've turned into.
I sound like somebody who's like defending Daenerys and Thrones or something, but I actually think it's all there. I think everything that they needed to telegraph his turn is there. Again, the scene in the park, the idea of like, again, he's constantly reconstructing himself to the point where he doesn't even recognize himself anymore.
No.
And again, and it sounds silly, and I understand that, but at the same time, she is so sexy and charming and hot.
Yeah.
That's part of the point. It's like, what would you do if this guy who doesn't deserve this woman finds himself with her? Wouldn't you do everything you could to keep her? It's like there's all kinds of things going on here that I think actually do this perfectly. To take it a bit further, though, the movie does kind of add a little bit of a like happy ever after tag on the very end, where they kind of like talk to their children about how they've met. So, but I feel like either I've experienced it personally, or I know other people who've experienced those types of transitions. Like obviously not to the point where they've killed somebody, but I actually just thought it was super thoughtful and authentic.
Well, I think that's the point that pushes it for me is taking, because, and a lot of movies don't do this, where you're taking a life for the first time, and I guess for her second time, right? You're taking a life, and it's that moment where you fall in despair of, oh my God, what did I just do? And you kind of get that here, but it's such a drastic thing, and it's a drastic decision to make that it's like, and again, they do such a good job of it in the movie of pointing you in that direction, but I guess it didn't quite fit the tone set up earlier on in the movie, even though it does a nice job of weaving in various types of storytelling here. But this is just me trying to defend. I don't obviously fully fall into this category, but this is just me trying to defend. I could see how someone would taking that life as a drastic step for at least Gary, even though Gary is now more Ron than Gary by the end of the film, which is funny.
But I think another crucial scene to understanding Madison is when they're in the closet, and she kind of has to step on that bag to get to his level. That's the conversation where he tells her that he visited with her ex and that he's going to kill her. Yeah. So what does someone do when they find out they're about to die at the hand of their husband? It's like, okay, if that's true, then one of the only things I can do is kill him before he kills me.
Kill him first.
So, I mean, I think that is also crucial to sort of understanding this. And it's like, yeah, that's crazy, but I mean, that tells me everything I need to know to buy into what's going on. So I don't know. I was just along for the ride, simply put. And I was loving every turn, without a doubt.
That being said, I mean, I do, without those moments and without this escalation happening towards the end of the film, it wouldn't have made the mark that it did. if that makes sense. It would have just been a conventional romantic comedy and everybody's a good person and everyone lives happily ever after by the end. That's not the case. That's not the case. They do kind of live happily ever after, but they're still having to live with that decision that they made and maybe multiple other decisions because we don't know what happened after that. And so that's fascinating for me, especially the character being a philosophy teacher and balancing all of those different, the way you can perceive what you did. Why did I do what I do? Did I have to do that? Did I do that out of love? And I think a lot of these questions could be answered with a yes, he did. And it possibly was a selfish decision on his part, but at the same time, sometimes you got to do what you got to do to get out of a situation. And that's exactly what they did. And so I just like that this is more than just the movie that I would have anticipated on its surface. It ended up being a lot more. And that ending really just put the cherry on top. I mean, it literally put the cherry on top with the kids, but it did a nice job of just heightening my expectations while I was watching.
My last question for you. How did you interpret the scene in the diner when Gary chooses to show his face to Michael at the end of their conversation? I'm not entirely sure I understand why he did that. I kind of also, the last thing I expected Mike to say, wasn't that his name, Mike, her husband?
I believe so, maybe.
Well, either way, we'll call him Mike. The last thing I expected Mike to say before he left was, "I'll take care of it myself." Because I don't know. I figured he would have felt fear in the moment.
Sure.
Because he had already been told that he was a professional, and he's like, "Professional what?" And when he turns around in the diner, all he knows, he met a professional hitman, and that's why he should stay the hell away from her. So I don't know how I feel about that moment more than any moment in the movie.
Sure. I didn't question that as much from Gary's perspective. That's a spur of the moment decision. That is, what is the best way I could strike fear into this guy's heart? Also, I'm pissed off right now because I'm confronting the guy who's going to kill the woman that I'm falling in love with. And so what's the best way to approach it? And he seems like a guy who would maybe think about that a lot beforehand. So maybe it wasn't a spur of the moment decision, but it seemed to me like I'm going to intimidate him. And I'm going to intimidate the hell out of him.
But I don't
right
think
here
that he
and now.
did. I didn't feel like there was a I mean, I guess he did, but I didn't feel it. And
but think about Mike's, we'll call him Mike. Think about his personality too, and what he was already planning on doing, that the type of person that he is to do that, right? She was planning on hiring a hitman out of fear. He was planning on hiring a hitman out of just like revenge and anger and just that's the type of person that he is. And so maybe he wouldn't be as intimidated by a hitman who turned around and said something like that to him. Maybe his rationale is, oh, well, now I got to find a way to kill both of these people. You know what I mean? Like, so maybe that's just his personality to try to dive into the philosophy of it all, the personality at play. I guess the psychology would be a better way to put it.
Yeah, the person that we've been calling Mike the whole time, his name was Ray. It wasn't Mike, but that's fine.
Ray. Hey, that's funny. I initially in my review called Gary's alter ego Ray instead of Ron, and then I had to correct myself. So that's who I was thinking of then. See? I wasn't too far off.
In 2 weeks' time, Netflix references pie in their movie. It's we got Atlas, the big tag in Atlas is, do you prefer cake or pie or whatever? I like both. Mm-hmm. I watched that, by the way. Did you?
You did?
Yeah. I like
What'd
both.
What'd you think? Yes.
Awful.
It is. Terrible. Why did people watch
that? Final word. If there are any Latinas out there who want to shout out a white boy, hit me up. Major plus if you look like Adria or Amanda Stenberg, whatever her name is. That's all I got for you, Burke. I think much like the movie Hitman, we gave our audience a meal this week for sure with this
Yes.
podcast.
Yeah, it's a big one. It was a hefty one, but we had a lot to talk about, man. A lot of content dropped this week. I think we chose the right focus because out of all of it, Hitman was the best thing that I watched this week, even though I saw it for the first time a couple of weeks ago. But I'm excited for people to see this, man. Great date night film. Great having a friend over film. Great movie if you're comfortable enough with it to watch with some family members if you're a little older. So I think it's just all around the right kind of movie. And finally, I think we're going to have a movie trending on Netflix this year that's worth trending on Netflix. And I'm excited for that.
100%. All right, guys. I guess the last thing I should mention. So we've changed the Patreon around a little bit. We've tried to make it more efficient for us, but also better for you all. So we didn't want to overpromise, without lack of a better term. So we decided to take away the video from Patreon, and instead of doing that, it's just too much. It was just too much to upload the video 2 different places, and part of it's my fault. You can blame me entirely because it's me that's doing it. But we decided that we're just going to add a bi-weekly podcast instead. So the $10 tier, you can get an extra podcast. We're going to call it Rec Room. Austin and I are just going to hit record and chat, talk about whatever we want to talk about. And we'll also do movie commentaries as well. So basically every week it will be either Rec Room or a commentary. And we'll tell you more about that after we talk more about that off air. So check that out. But the $5 tier, that's when you get the podcast early, the extra 15 minutes, all that good stuff. And that's not to say that we might not add some of that stuff back in, but we're just kind of getting started here. So we wanted to make sure that it was easy for us to accomplish while also making sure that you get your money's worth because you're graciously supporting us. Patreon.com/movie mode pod. Do you have anything else you want to end with?
Well, and audio is just a lot easier in general. So we're taking away early access for the video, but we're adding a whole new show. And I think that's exciting. I think that's something that Patreon listeners are going to enjoy. Yeah, guys, whatever platform you prefer, if it's audio, if you want to leave a 5-star rating, that would be incredible. But even if you don't prefer video, if you want to go over and just drop a subscription, just maybe follow us on that journey as well. We may have some extra stuff over there just to support all platforms because we're really trying to launch this. But the focus right now is on the audio feed because that's what the most, I think, tedious thing is to grow. But it's awesome, and you all have been super supportive. So thank you for that, and thanks for following me along on my channel and Ryan along on his channel individually because that's important as well. Yeah, Ryan, that's it, man. I'm happy with this. Very happy.
Me too. Guys, I don't even know what we're doing next week, but we'll see you there when we do it. Bye-bye.
See ya.